Like any horror movie that gets a lot of buzz, The Black Phone, which had its wide release in 2022, got a lot of flowers from those that really clicked with what the movie was going for. Naturally, there was a select audience that didn't really gel with the movie. It didn't really work for them. Somehow, this movie actually ended up being pretty divisive. But shocker, what big horror movie isn't? Personally, I really like the movie. I think it has a lot of strengths, a tight script, interesting characters, a great villain, and it has a really cool vibe. Keeping in mind that this is a sequel, and I'm glad that the same cast came back. Ethan Hawke, Mason Thames, and Madeline McGraw all reprised their respective roles, as well as Scott Derrickson spearheads the project again. A few years after the events of the original film, Finn, who is now 17, struggles with life after his captivity. His sister Gwen begins receiving calls in her dreams from the Black Phone and seeing disturbing visions of 3 boys being stalked at a winter camp known as Alpine Lake. And as she begins to discover more about her gift, she realizes that everything that happens in the dream world also happens in the real world, so Nancy has to defeat and outwit Freddy by using his deductive skills. Wait. Wrong movie. I kid, but it really does scream Nightmare on Elm Street to me anytime I'd see the trailers for this thing. In the Black Phone's defense, that's not an exclusive plot to Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, Wes Craven literally only thought of that concept after studying sleep paralysis, which most people are aware of. To be candid though, the mere existence of this movie is a bit bizarre just because of how the first movie ended. The first film made it very clear there is a supernatural element, but something about the grabber coming back from the dead just feels weird. And to not only bring him back in spirit form, but to also give him this insane power to be able to attack you in your dreams just feels funny. I will say it's a clever move from Scott to really pivot the focus to Gwen's character, since she really resonates with the viewer. She just has that bite that really hooks you into the story. And narratively, it makes sense to make her the lead since she's the one that has the gift and she's also the one doing the sleepwalking shenanigans. But if you really think about it, it kinda gives Halloween Resurrection vibes, where putting aside for a moment that this is based off of a short story, The Black Phone is its own isolated story that has nothing to follow up on. The story is over, there is nothing left to say, and it's still debatable if there's anything said in this movie. I digress, because also, how else are the studio execs going to afford their new iPhone 17 Pros? There's a lot that I enjoy about the original, and one of the things that I liked the most about it was the intrigue within the story. Some consider it to be plain even, but I really like the mystery for what it is. The Black Phone 2 does away with all that ambiguity, and it's kind of a bummer because again, that was one of the best parts of that movie. Because when the reveals happen, it hits way harder. Oh my god, he was right under Deputy So-and-so this whole time! Thankfully, they didn't expound on the lore of the grabber too much. Over-explaining rarely ever pays off, and clearly with the travesty we just witnessed in Strangers Chapter 2, it's clear they dodged the bullet by not trying to humanize him. But for the rest of the movie, it did get the eye twitching just a bit with how much hand-holding there was in this movie. Like, you trusted the audience in the original to not need to do that. What happened? There's also a lot of weird, almost clunky, melodramatic exposition and dialogue that didn't really work for me, especially with how long some of those bits would go on for. I will say there's still good character stuff. I really liked the dynamic between the siblings in the original despite them not being on screen together for much time, but that's just how strong that bond felt. So with that same energy carrying over to the sequel and having them actually be together was a real treat to watch. The gore in this movie is given the Terrifier special, which is crazy since the original movie has a disturbing quality to it since the subject matter is centered around kids. So in terms of effects, they didn't hold back. But this is another aspect of the movie that I just feel conflicted on. Gratuitous is the word that comes to mind. Like, there's very upsetting stuff in this thing that are shown as flashbacks in that Super 8 ultra grainy film look, but it just feels a tad excessive considering who it's being done to. What I mean is, I can't help but feel like it's being done for shock value. It's a hard thing to balance between showing too much and too little. This being the former, it just felt cruel. It's like the movie didn't trust that it would be devastating enough to have the kids still be the focal point of the story. It's the sequel, so we have to push it even further. But did you really have to basically mangle them to make that point clear? Don't get me wrong, outside of that, the gore is definitely elevated compared to the original, and it looks great. I thought it was a neat touch to pay homage to Curtains, which is such a low-budget old-school movie. So doing the ice skating rink sequence was a nice little tribute, and it shows that Scott has a reverence for the stuff that he's borrowing and implementing in this film. And in general, the movie looks awesome. The colder color palette that's chosen for the movie really works in the favor of what the movie's trying to emulate, that being to feel desolate and cold and uncomfortable. The more I think about this movie, the more I realize how conflicted my feelings are about the movie, because despite me sounding like a negative Nancy, this movie is good, and I think more than good. The word that I would use to describe this movie is cool, because so many of the visuals are just so so cool to look at. There's a scene that blows me away because you have Finney as your focus, and when you first see him, there's nothing around him, and without cutting, it starts panning to different angles of him, revealing new people that weren't in that shot originally. It's just so sick. And the movie still tries to work with interesting ideas. The characters and performances are still really strong. Finney is dealing with the most emotional turmoil. He's more of a bitter guy now. He's also known as the guy that killed the grabber, and that trauma that he carries with him has basically left him a shell of a human. He's pretty much in defense mode the entire movie, and it just feels really sad, but I really like how real it feels. Madeline McGraw is made for this role. She has much more interaction with the grabber, and because of that, there's constantly this overwhelming sense of fear and vulnerability, because for as strong as she is, death is constantly hovering over her. And there's not just a physical vulnerability, but an emotional one too, and sometimes it feels like she's forced to act a little too melodramatic, but she sells it in spite of that. Her tenaciousness is more present than ever, and it's so exciting to watch. I think the injection of lore is interesting, and like I said before, I'm really happy they didn't try and go too deep into the grabber's backstory. The grabber himself, even though it takes him like half the movie to get going, has so much aura. I love how the characters really sell you on their fear of him. It makes him feel more real than a typical slasher villain. He's still as intimidating and nefarious as ever despite the abysmal kill count, because spoiler alert, there isn't one. I joked about how familiar this is to Nightmare on Elm Street visually, but despite who it's being done to, I really liked the sequences. They felt very Freddy-esque. Possibly it leaned into the Freddy style a bit too much, but I'm not gonna lie, it was really cool and fun. The sound design gets under your skin, and the sequences being shot on film felt so unapologetically raw that I couldn't help but think how it reminded me of Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre with how real it felt. That being said, it's the fault in the dialogue and story that really drags down this project. I can't help but think how forced the problem in this movie feels. In the original, it was about how to save Finney from the grabber using the other kid's knowledge and experience as well as his own wits. Here, it's like these other kids that we don't know need help, and they reached out to the pros because they were able to beat the grabber once, so they can do it again. It doesn't feel as personal or as dire to me because the attachment is with Gwen and Finney. It's asking a lot to care about all of these characters. Also, it feels redundant and messy that at first the grabber can only harm you in your dreams, and if he does, it carries over to the real world. Cool, copy, I get that. To me, it makes it clear that there's still a division between the real world and the dream world, but the grabber can just harm others in the real world from the dream world. It makes the screenplay feel underdeveloped, sloppy, and just straight up unsure of itself, and it makes the grabber seem like such an idiot for not having killed them all from the very beginning of the movie. You wouldn't have to wait until they were near the kids' bodies to start hurting them, and especially because why would he even let them get so close to the bodies, since that's like his kryptonite? Where's all that vengeance is mine energy? It really harms the tension of the movie for me, and I just can't get past how silly it is. And the grabber just actively being in the real world despite previously only seeming to be present in her visions just feels weird. Like, fine, whatever, she's asleep, but it just feels wrong. It also obliterates the specialness about Gwen, because if you can just be a poltergeist and hurt everybody in the real world, then it completely strips away that uniqueness about her as the main character. And this is something that directly hurts the significance of Gwen's character, and it has nothing to do with Madeline's performance, because honestly, it's probably better in this movie than in the original. My personal compromise for this movie is that it should be an anthology, kind of like what Halloween should have been, where you give the grabber a new set of skills and a new world to build around each time, and it works better that way. Honestly, it's just sad that from the outside, it really does feel like because of how much money the first one made, the studio said, well Scott, you better get on it, I need that sequel money. I don't believe this movie harms the overall appeal of the grabber or the black phone concept. I think the movie is fine, it's just not strong enough to merit a sequel to a great one-off like the black phone. But that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe, and sincerely yours, Anthony.